Here with us now, adjunct senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations and former foreign policy advisor in the Bush administration, Dan Senor. He co-wrote a piece in Time.com on Iran. He writes this: "The job of an American president is not that of a history professor, but an actor in history. As masses march and bullets fly this weekend, a timeless question cannot be avoided. Even if we cannot know or control the outcome, we have a responsibility through our actions as a nation to answer clearly the question, whose side are we on?" For President Obama's team, Monday could begin a critical week of assessment. Dan, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good to be with you.
Tell us why today is such a critical day.
Well, I think the violence has gotten much worse than the administration anticipated. I think there's been an internal divide in the administration. I think some wanted to be a little more forward-leaning, and some wanted to make a stronger statement earlier on. They were afraid that the president was missing this moment in history. Everyone was speaking out. The president of France was speaking out. The prime minister of Canada was speaking out. The chancellor of Germany was speaking out. Then suddenly Congress spoke out, and it wasn't just congressional Republicans that spoke out on Friday. Howard Berman, the chairman, California Democrat, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was a co-sponsor of that resolution. So the world seemed to be speaking out domestically and abroad, and the president had been silent. I think there were some in his administration that wanted him to be more visible. I think this weekend made that posture of low visibility untenable, and I think he gave a much better statement this weekend, and I think it's going to get much stronger. And I think the logical implication of the direction he's going rhetorically is that this country, in a coordinated international context, is going to call either for a real recount from that election and possibly a new election similar to the Ukraine situation 2004-2005.
Joe Scarborough's down in Pensacola has a question for you. Joe?
Hey, Dan, let me read you the statement that the president made on the 20th, and let me ask you what you think he should have done more strongly than this. Put it up if you guys have the statement.
Yep.
Up. Guys, all right. "We call on the Iranian government to stop all violent and unjust actions against its own people. The universal rights to assembly and free speech must be respected, and the United States stands with all who seek to exercise those rights. As I said in Cairo, suppressing ideas never succeeds in making them go away. If the Iranian government seeks the respect of the international community, it must respect the dignity of its own people and govern through consent, not coercion." Dan, what else would you have the president say other than that? That sounds
It's good. It's a good statement. It's a lot better than what the statement the White House put out a week ago, which was there's a vigorous debate going on inside Iran, a vigorous debate. So this statement was much better. But here's the point, Joe. These reform movements typically wither when the world is not watching. If you just look at the experience of failed reform movements, whether it was in Tibet in 2008 when the Bush administration's response was lackluster, whether it was the Egyptian elections in 2005 where there was a real bona fide reform movement, didn't go anywhere. Georgia, Russia this summer, the crisis in Georgia, again, not a strong international response, things quieted down. Unless the world starts putting a spotlight on what is going on, these things tend to die down. You don't get as many cracks in the establishment.
There's a spotlight. There's been, though, Dan, a spotlight on Iran every single day. And again, this question about whether people know where we stand. My gosh, we've called Iran an evil empire.
This president has not. This president has not called Iran an evil empire. I would be thrilled if he pulled a Reagan and called it an evil empire. This president hasn't called Iran an evil empire.
So do you think that Barack Obama calling the Iranian government an evil empire would help the demonstrators in the streets?
I'll tell you, if the Secretary of State picked up the phone and tried to track down Mousavi and check on his security and see how we can help, the same with Rafsanjani and his family, if the president called a conference of all the major CEOs of U.S. tech companies, Google, Twitter, YouTube, and said, let's hold a summit here and figure out how we can put a block on all these blocks that the Iranian government is putting on these key tools of technology that the Iranian government is so terrified of. If the president met with international leaders, Sarkozy, Harper, Merkel, and said, what kind of international coordinated response can we do calling for a new election? These sorts of actions matter. I like his rhetoric from this weekend. I think it's going to get even tougher. But there are also actual steps he can take to show that he is standing with these reformers. And I do believe it'll help the reformers.
How do you know he's not quietly doing that behind the scenes?
If he is quietly doing those things behind the scenes, I am thrilled. And I give him praise about things I don't know about. But everyone I'm talking to, and I think many of the folks around this table are talking to, the sense is this statement that he has given is the extent of which she's willing to go right now. And again, I don't want to begrudge him. It was a good statement. It was better than the vigorous debate statement from earlier in the week. But there are steps he could be taking to sort of capture the moment. I mean, it's an amazing thing. If you look back to, say, the end of the Cold War, take the former Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia. When Václav Havel and a lot of his guys were released from prison, these were playwrights and artistic types who had been leading this revolution in Czechoslovakia. They went to their counterparts in the left here in the United States, and they said, where were you? Why was it only some right-wing president named Ronald Reagan who was speaking about our freedom? Do you know how critical it is for dissident movements to have a president stand up and take actions the way he provided key technology, Reagan did, to the Solidarity movement in Poland? These things matter. And they said to the left, why are you silent? Why were you silent? And the reality was the left was largely silent because they hated Reagan more than they hated communism. And if Reagan was speaking tough about communism, then they were going to be silent. I think there's a mistake here in this country for the left to go down that same path.
Yeah, Dan, this president hasn't been silent. I mean, this is a president who actually went on the internet and on television and spoke to the Iranian people, much to the criticism of many Republicans. This is a president who made a speech in Cairo that was overwhelmingly received as tremendously positive on many levels. This is a president who's been very clear about where we stand on Iran and is monitoring the situation. And from all the contacts that I have, they're definitely trying to figure out what their next move is, and they're being incredibly careful. It seems to me that you're looking for any reason to criticize this president when right now they seem to be doing the practical thing, and they have spoken out. You cannot say this president has been silent. That's ridiculous.
Can I respond to that, Mika? First of all, I think it is unfair to ascribe my motives to just political posturing. I can't speak to some of my ideological cohorts, but let me say this. I have been strongly supportive of what this president has done in Afghanistan. I've been strongly supportive of his re-upping his commitment to Iraq. The notion that we're making these foreign policy statements just for political posturing purposes, I think, is a little unfair. Secondly...
Then what are your intentions?
No. My intentions are to help the reform movement in Iran. I think this is a big moment in history, and I want America to participate in it. Right now, we're observers. We are not participating in it. His Cairo speech was important. I think his Cairo speech was an important part of what's happening in Iran today. I think when the administration dispatched Vice President Biden to Lebanon on the eve of the Lebanese elections, it was critical in helping to galvanize the anti-Hezbollah coalition that ultimately won in that election. I think this administration deserves tremendous credit for, quote-unquote, meddling in those situations. I think now the world is calling for similar action.
All right. Hey, Dan, thanks for being with us. And actually, we're going to, Chris, try to get Dan on radio because this is a critical conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, we'd love to have more.
It's great to have your side of it this morning. And Jack's going to be on this morning, too. Maybe Jack, as you two sit in the radio studio together, maybe Jack can give you one of those advanced degrees from his college. So, Dan Senor.
He already has one.
Yeah.
He's an MBA from Harvard.
Yeah, but this could be like my second degree.